Hello, everyone. Welcome to Risk Roundup. Cyberspace has brought us all a security threat that has no visible front, borders, or armies. With millions of annual cyber attacks, cybercrime today has become a real threat to anyone using computers, smartphones, tablets, Internet of Things, and any other gadgets that are connected to the Internet. With each year passing, cybercrimes keep rising. Now, when we look back at 2017, the world has witnessed so many security breaches. While some have been reported, there are perhaps many more that were not reported. Needless to say, the war for cybersecurity rages on as nations seem to be moving rapidly towards one of the most open societies in a world that is more connected than ever before without the necessary security framework and infrastructure in cyberspace, geospace, or space, in short referred to as CGS. So, irrespective of individuals and entities across nations, its government, industries, organizations, and academia, in short referred to as NGIOA, when we try to protect ourselves against the threat from cyberspace, it is important to understand that threat vulnerability comes not only from cyberspace, but also from geospace and space. Irrespective of whether those vulnerabilities from CGS, that means cyberspace, geospace, and space, are intentional or accidental, it can obtain, damage, or destroy any asset in cyberspace, geospace, or space due to cyberspace connectivity with geospace and space. So, as we begin 2018, it is important that we evaluate new developments in cybersecurity, understand the trends, and forecast predictions. To discuss cybersecurity trends and predictions for 2018, I'm honored to welcome Rob May to Risk Roundup. Rob May is the Managing Director of RAMSAC. He is also the Chairman at Institute of Directors based in UK, and he is also a published author. Welcome, Rob. We are delighted to have you on Risk Roundup.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, Rob. So let's look back to 2017. Today, cyberspace is deeply embedded across day-to-day lives of individuals and entities across NGIOA. That means nations, its government, industries, organizations, and academia. Everyone is connected these days. As a result, its crowded interconnections are bringing very complex, chaotic, and challenging times for everyone. It seems nobody is secure across nations. So when we look back at 2017, from what we have seen, which are the most notable data breaches that are concerning to everyone, as irrespective of whether we are individuals or entities?
So if I reflect on sort of the cyber news in the UK, probably in 2017, the WannaCry outbreak had massive impact. It closed down big swathes of our healthcare system. Countless operations were cancelled, and it was absolute mayhem. And when you look at that, that was a ransomware attack. In the UK press, it got reported as a National Health Service attack, and it wasn't that at all. It wasn't aimed at them. It just so happened that the NHS were one of the highest profile organisations that haven't been patching their systems and are reusing, out of date IT equipment. And some of that's down to budget, some of that's down to, government budget, and some of it is down to bad practice when it comes to IT management. And I think if you take that as an example and you look at countless other attacks, so often they could have been mitigated by people properly and looking after the technology that they're using. As you say, we're all connected, we're all using tech all the time, and that tech has to be managed and it has to be maintained.
Yes, very true. That's an excellent example, and that has so many vulnerabilities and so many complex challenges on every front, and it is a cause of concern because that preparedness that we would like to see in our systems That was not there. So when cyberspace fundamentally changes the definition and meaning of security, there is no such thing as secure anymore. And that's what we are witnessing everywhere across nations. And when we integrate that and incorporate that into geospace and space, all our systems that are connected, and the complex security challenges becomes, much more complex. So when the security concept is currently being subjected to such huge changes with respect to its aims and capabilities and sources and connectivity and the different dimensions of threats, it makes us wonder how the many unknowns of cybersecurity are influencing the average cost of data breach. Now, I'm not sure what was the cost of that data breach that you just talked about in UK, the because of that ransomwares or malware. So, what was the cost of security breach as you witnessed that in UK?
Yeah, I don't know what the total cost is. I mean, I read a report recently that said the worldwide cost of cybercrime in 2017 was $4 trillion. And the prediction is that that's rising by $1 trillion per year. And in my book that I wrote on the subject, I visualized that, and I worked out that if you $4 trillion, I mean it's massive, but what does that mean? If you were to stack $1 bills, $4 trillion would reach the moon, and it would weigh 40 tons. I mean, it's just a massive amount of.
It is massive. That is true. That is very true, and it just keeps increasing. And the decision makers are still not able to come to understanding of how to actually reverse these or how to control these. And so that is a complex challenge because the nature of the vulnerabilities that the cyberspace and the connected computers brings to each one of us, irrespective of whether we see the physical systems or digital systems or space systems, it is very, very complex, and there are many unknowns than knowns to be able to go ahead and fix the problem. So as we focus on cyberspace and cybersecurity, what trends, challenges, and threats you see that awaits all of us across nations, irrespective of whether it's UK or United States or Europe or Asia, anywhere, or Middle East or Africa, that we are all facing in 2018?
So I think one of the things that will grow is attacks that are powered by artificial intelligence. I think that's currently, the cyber industry, in terms of the good guys who are trying to protect, are using more and more artificial intelligence to try and understand patterns and so on. But the tools that are available to the good guys are also available to the bad guys. And I think we'll see more of that. I think in terms of technology, in terms of protection technology, one of the things that's emerged over the last 18 months is sandbox technology. So the way this works, you have an environment within your IT that's looking for file activity. And so if files were being encrypted by a ransomware attack, for example, rather than doing it on the live system, the computer starts to do it in the sandbox and then realizes that this is an attack, therefore it stops it and it rolls it back. And that was great technology. What we're now seeing is malware attacks that are sandbox intelligent. And what they're doing is they're sensing that the sandbox there, and they're not actually delivering their payload until they're out of the sandbox environment. So, for every time that we come up with technology and systems to protect ourselves, so the criminals are let's face it, if the industry is worth $4 trillion and is growing at $1 trillion a year, this is very, very lucrative, and there's a lot of money to be invested in terms of trying to attack businesses. And some of it, I think, is targeted and some of it is.
That's very true. That's very true. And the first point that you made about the AI-based attacks and machine learning, AI and machine learning-based attacks, that is a real cause of concern because we are just not prepared for those kind of scenarios. And I mean, even without AI, we are not able to manage effectively the cyber attacks that are coming our way. They are so complex. So now when you add the magnitude of AI, it is going to be so much more difficult, or it's probably in some cases it's going to be impossible to be able to prevent that effectively. So that is a real cause of concern. So have you seen any activities as far as the regulatory changes coming our way in 2018 so that we can manage this kind of complex challenges? Are any nations working on preventing those kind of AI based attacks or any other kind of attacks or any other kind of breaches?
I think all the big security providers are working on technology. I think if you look at changes which are coming, in 2018, we've got the introduction of GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, and where that really starts to fine businesses who suffer data breaches. And the cost of data breaches, I think, is just going to really ramp up. And I heard one argument that said there will be some people who will pay more ransom to get out of the problem rather than dealing with a GDPR declaration where they've got to pay a big fine. In my recent TED talk, I cited the fact that I was at a presentation with Microsoft 18 months ago, and the FBI were there. And the FBI said at that point there were two types of organisation. There are those organisations that have suffered a cyber attack, a data breach, and those that will. And then in the summer, I was in Toronto with Microsoft, and the same speaker from the FBI was there. And this time what he said is there's two types of organisation: those that have suffered a cyber attack and those that don't know they have. And this is quite different, because what they're now saying is, okay, we don't know when the attack happens. There's a breach, there's an attack, people are getting inside your organisation or inside your data, and they're learning about you, and they're learning about your reporting levels and your, who has financial authority. And I was having a discussion about this recently, and the challenge, and I've not seen this addressed anywhere, but the thought that occurred to me is what starts to happen from an insurance point of view. Businesses insure against cyber threats, but the very insurance model works on the fact that everybody pays their premiums and very few people have a claim. But when it comes to cyber, if what we're saying is every organisation will have a claim, how do you fund the cost of insurance? And I think it's going to be a really interesting challenge that unfolds for us all as business people, around the globe.
Yes, it is. It is a very complex challenge, and you made a very valid point about the cyber insurance, because if every individual and if every entity across organization are going to face the cyber, security breach, either today or tomorrow, then how is insurance industry going to cope up with that kind of, challenges? And we have been promoting designing the whole insurance system, because the biggest challenge I see in the insurance with the cyber insurance is that at this point we don't have a structure that manages the interconnected and interdependent risk. So even if, let's say, some organizations have data breaches and they are able to pay the hackers or these cyber attackers, some money and ransom, and get out of that, and they think that they are safe. But it has a lot of unintended consequences, because it is not just about them. If there are partners or vendors, and if there are interconnectivity, then other organizations are going to be impacted. So who is responsible for interconnected and interdependent risk that is emerging in because of the cyberspace, because cyberspace connects both geospace and space, as well as it connects individuals as well as entities across NGI, because no longer we are facing the challenge that, okay, if you are working in an organization, your computer is impacted, your maybe phone is impacted, but you use that phone at home also. So you bring those risks from work at home also. So there are a lot of different challenges, and how are we going to manage the interconnected interdependent risk? Because right now nobody is interested in talking about that. We have been trying to push that dialogue that let's focus on the interconnected interdependent risk, because when it comes to independent risk, any organization with an effective risk management framework, cybersecurity risk management framework, or integrated risk management framework, they will be in a position to manage that as much as possible. And if every organization takes that accountability, responsibility, that the risk that rises within their corporate boundaries, that they are responsible and they manage it effectively, then the insurance industry should not issue any policy for any risk, any cybersecurity risk arising from within any corporate boundaries that are manageable. So there is a need for integration between risk management and between the insurance industry and between probably government, because there is a need for redefining and redesigning the whole framework and the whole system. The insurance industry will have to play much bigger role. They could be the enforcers of risk management framework, that they have to when the insurance industry was established probably hundreds of years back, 150 or 200 years back, I'm not sure, it's between 100 and 200 years back. So they used to make sure that the houses have chimneys and all that before they would give the fire, they would issue any insurance on fire and things like that. So that was the time when insurance industry was much more accountable. Now they are just looking at money, that okay, if you have money to pay for the premiums, we will issue a policy. They are not, they walked away from being the enforcers of risk management, or making sure that standards and everything that needs to be there, that they are maintained. So insurance industry will have to go back to the roots and go back to understanding what their role is when they are issuing policy. So that is the bigger challenge that I see, and we have been trying to push that dialogue, because if we have an effective structure, a risk management structure that is tied to insurance industry, then there are a lot of risks that will be automatically managed, and we won't be needing to issue policies for each and every kind of cyber risk that is emerging. So that is a big challenge. But let's go back to the in the beginning you talked about the WannaCry, and the challenge that UK faced because of that, and ransomware has been a growing threat for the last several years. So as it continues to claim these high profile victims like what UK faced, what is being done about ransomware? Has anything changed in how to deal with the ransomware?
I mean, the technology continues to improve, and companies continue to invest. I think that, my TED talk was called The Human Firewall. And the problem is, and it links back to something you just touched upon when you were talking about how the insurance companies used to be, where they used to check the chimney and the fireplace and so on. And I think one of our challenges is organizations invest in hardware and in software and in, web filtering and email filtering. And the analogy that I use is if you were securing your building, what you're doing when you buy the very best firewall and the best software and the best filtering and all the rest of it, if your IT was a building, what you've done is you've bought the very best alarm system, you've put bars on every window, you put the very best locks on every door, and your building is as secure as it could be. But with ransomware, the way that works is a crook under some form of disguise has come up to the front door of your building and pressed the buzzer, and one of your team has invited them in. And it doesn't matter that you spent all that money on security, because if a member of your team openly invites them into your organization, metaphorically or otherwise, then you're at risk. And I think this is really difficult. Our people are our biggest challenge, and technology will continue. We've got there's now a pixel virus, so there are websites where one pixel on the website can be infected, and it's completely down to bad luck. But if your mouse goes over that single pixel, that's what triggers the ransomware. I mean, these things just continue to evolve, and the challenge continues. But training and people awareness and education and getting people to be more mindful, I suppose, more present in terms of what are they doing, because we're busy, right? We're dealing with thousands or hundreds of messages every single day, and there's loads of calls on our time and our attention, and the criminals are using that to try and trick us. And I think there has to be ongoing. It's not just about the technology, and it's not just about how the technology evolves, but it's about the awareness.
Yes.
And people
Yes,
get tricked all the time. People get scammed all the time.
yes, they do. They do. Very, very true. And those are the complex challenges, because, like you said, we get so many emails every single day, and then by accident or by ignorance, a lot of times people click on those links, and even on social media they go and they click on links. So there are a lot of challenges emerging because of that, and I feel that, and we at Risk Group are trying to promote this, that education awareness, like you said, is a fundamental necessity now, because there are so many changes happening so rapidly that we have to educate the workforce. We have to keep educating everyone. So even the decision makers, we have to keep educating them. But at the same time, we do need to put a structure by just telling them that, hey, look, you should not click on links without understanding, and because there could be ransomware, or there could be all kinds of malwares and things like that. If we just tell that, the human nature is such that they will understand that, but it will not be implemented in their behavior effectively unless we put in an incentive structure. So if we put in an incentive structures, that, let's say, for something as big as, we are promoting global peace through risk management, and what we would do, we feel that what would work is that if we put an incentive structure that each and every risk that any individual or any employee is able to prevent, or any cyber threat they're able to prevent, or anything they identify which would prevent any kind of risk, then there should be a point system where they collect more points, and the more points they collect, eventually the global peace prize should be integrated, tied to that how many risks, who has prevented the most number of risks, and we have to come up with proper structure of that. But if we tie that to some bigger goals, and if we tie some financial incentives to prevention of risk, or to identify risk, or to manage risk effectively, then the human nature is such that they would feel compelled that, if I do this correctly, if I prevent risk, or if I manage risk then I will either get a financial award because of that. Maybe employees will collect the points and the bonuses will be tied to that. Or if we, at the end of the day, if I manage enough risk, if I prevent some big cybersecurity breach or threat that impacts my organization or my country, then they collect many more points, and we can have peace prizes, or some sort of prizes, at every level. So people will feel incentivized. They would have a desire to do something better by just education, by having, there are lots of education material, lots of books, lots of seminars, lots of talks on that. It's not going to change behavior unless we integrate that with some sort of effective system that would give them a desire to do that. But anyway, that's what we are pushing, that we should tie things effectively, so that we should integrate, so that humans have a desire to change their behavior, because changing behavior for humans is very, very difficult task. And just by education awareness, it will probably take us decades or century to be able to come up with that. And by that time we would come up with much more complex risk that would require different kind of behavioral change. So anyway, that those are the challenges, but that requires a lot of different people, everyone working together to come up with to make systemic changes like that. But let's talk about the IoTs, because Internet of Things brings many complex challenges, security threats. Currently, as we say, and as more and more IoT devices are getting connected, the more security challenges are emerging because of that. So, what is the status from your perspective on the IoT security?
Well, I think ransomware of Internet of Things is going to grow as an issue. I don't think we've really seen that yet, but everything is connected, and I look at the tech in my life and the connected technology in my life, and look at how it's linked, and you think it's a natural step. And I think if it's not 2018, it will be 2019 that we see more issues of ransomware, of connected, of Internet of Things. And Internet of Things, when you start to look at what that means, and you look at cars and infrastructure, and then you start to link that in with the sort of the worry that you read about in terms of state-sponsored cyber attacks, politically based, state-based attacks, and you think, yeah, Internet of Things, nobody's talking. People are talking about IoT. People aren't talking about SOT, and I think SOT, it's the security of things. And I think security of things needs to become an agenda item.
Yes, yes, I hear your point on that, and there is a critical need to address all those different risks that are emerging now. As we see, the challenges from cyberspace, geospace, space, or organizations and IoTs and smart cars and smart cities and smart enterprises, everything is getting connected now. So, how are the efforts going on? There is a need to develop a common security language. And while we see in each country, there's some sort of framework they are coming up with, cybersecurity framework. Each country has different framework. Every organization probably has different risk management process, and there is no commonality. There is no common security risk language. And I feel that that is a much bigger challenge because of that. Now NIST and others are coming up with their own versions of security framework. They all, if you evaluate them, they all are a good start, but they all lack the common language, and they lack the effective to address effectively all different variables that needs to be considered, like interconnected risk. Most of probably all of them focuses only on the independent risk, and I haven't seen any effective framework that addresses the interconnected, interdependent risk. So this lack of commonality in the security risk language is a huge risk. So, from your assessment, what efforts are going on to develop this common security risk language?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. There's disparate bodies or countries working on frameworks, but the key thing that's lacking is that commonality. And why is that? Is that simply a lack of trust and people are protecting their own? I don't know, but there needs to be. I mean, it's the logical thing. And I was reflecting as well when you were talking about sort of your sort of global peace concept, and I think that's brilliant, because currently there's far more kudos for the hackers, and look what we've achieved by breaching it. And some of it is malicious, and and some of it isn't. The average hacker is still only 17. In the UK, the biggest breach until very recently in terms of fines was an organisation called TalkTalk. Their attack was by a group of teenagers, two 15-year-olds, a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old. And they did it just to see whether they could. And this has been going on for, I remember in my youth watching war games, and that's exactly what that was about. It was a lad trying to hack into the Pentagon. And hackers do it because the challenge is there, in the same way that a climber will think, I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro because it's there and I'm going to see whether I can do it. But currently the hackers are the ones who are celebrated, and we're not celebrating the people who are protecting. And I think that's a really good point. And if we can get nations to come together in terms of security standards, then won't it be a better place?
Absolutely, and it is a doable thing. I mean, the brilliance of these teenagers, these young people, is so amazing. And if we can, right now they don't have any incentive, so they are just trying out all different things, and they get a thrill out of breaking the system. But if we can divert their energy and their brilliance towards doing something bigger than themselves to prevent attacks, to identify the hackers, and to prevent their initiatives or their efforts, and expose them, and that they get awards, they become like heroes, that would be much bigger incentive for these young people. And I think all nations need to come together to come up with such a framework and such a system that can provide that incentive, and then that can incentivize these young people to do the right thing rather than to do the wrong thing. And it's possible. I mean, we have put together a framework, and we are the whole purpose of this Risk Roundup discussion was to have the collective brain power on that how can we all come together to do something like that, so that we can prevent many security threats. Some decision makers that came on Risk Roundup, when I talked to them about the framework that we have put together with all these incentives and interconnected risk and everything, and they told me that if nations are able to do that effectively, we would pretty much prevent 80% of the security risks that are emerging across nations, almost
Yeah.
80%. And that's a huge advantage and huge incentive for us to work towards that. If we collectively, and again, no organization or no individual can do this on their own, everyone has to come together. All the organizations working, all decision makers, all nations, they have to come together. And if we are able to put together that collective intelligence into creating such framework that will work with everyone, we have put together a concept, we have put together guidelines and processes and all that. But if we collectively work together, our collective intelligence can achieve something like this. And that would be a huge achievement for everyone across nations. So I hope that we are able to do that in the coming years. It's going to take a lot of effort because nations have not worked effectively well together so far. So we have to overcome many challenges, but it is possible to do that, and there is a way to do that. So let's hope that decision makers understand that, and we are able to create a lot more awareness than what we are creating, and we are able to bring in a lot more voices into Risk Roundup, and we are able to create that kind of incentive and that kind of goals, those kind of goals that we can go towards that. But let's talk about another major challenge that cybersecurity industry faces is about applications, the risk emerging from applications, and patching and application testing. So there's a concern that the lot of data breaches that we have seen in 2017, those happened because there were vulnerabilities into these applications. And when we create applications, everyone is focused on functionality. People are, when the developers or the designers, they are not focused on the security at the architecture phase. So there are a lot of challenges emerging from that. And then when we do application testing also, people identify the problems. It's not that there's a lot of problems are not identified, but even though they are identified, there is not much action on it. So it doesn't matter if you identify the risk. If you cannot do anything effectively, then what's the point of doing it? So what is from your assessment, what is being done about these challenges that emerges from the application testing and patching, and all the vulnerabilities that rises from that?
So I think there's two things. One is the application testing, I think, is a really tricky problem. If you think, it's not that many years ago that the applications that an organization used within their business were controlled by IT. The IT director, or the CTO, or whoever it was, would have control over the technology that was deployed, and no department could use systems that hadn't been provisioned for them. In our interconnected, cloud-based, app-based world, you go into any organization and you look at departments, and you find that a department's bought an app and they've signed up for a pay-as-you-go cheap service that they didn't need IT to provision. They've done it themselves, and there's no testing as to who's created that, and what's the provenance of the development and the testing. So I think that's really difficult, and I don't see that tightening up. I think there's more and more people very easily creating applications, and we need a reliance on the framework of those applications to get better in terms of security. I think the thing that we can have more control over is the patching of core systems, of updating hardware and software, of ensuring that there are so many businesses that don't do encryption.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you'll hear news stories of people leaving devices in bars or in a cab or whatever it was, and there's so many of those that aren't encrypted. And where we've got the onset of something like GDPR as a regulation, that takes into account encryption. The way you have to react to a data breach is different if your data was encrypted compared to where it wasn't. And I think a lot of the logic there, with all the different countries who are coming together in terms of policing that, the cynics say, oh, this is about the fines and about persecuting businesses. I don't think it is. I don't think it's about the fines. I think there will be some big fines, because I think people will be held up to say, look, this is what could happen if you get it wrong. But I think the driver isn't about the money. I think the driver is about trying to force people to do best practice. Encryption technology has been around for goodness knows how long. So why isn't everybody using it? And what data are you holding on people? And I think, regulation that is protecting us as individuals and our rights is a good thing. But still, it's going to take time for people to get there. And, I think people will get fined along the way, but hopefully that will start to make people think. I mentioned TalkTalk earlier in terms of in the UK, they had the biggest fine until recently. They had the biggest fine that had been received in the UK. So that was given by the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. And they fined them $400,000. Under GDPR, the fine would have been 4% of global turnover, which is millions of dollars. The new fine is $20 million or 4%. And I think with TalkTalk, it would have worked out to be a $58 million fine rather than a $400,000 fine. And that's interesting. And when I say until recently that was the biggest fine, we're seeing other big name businesses in the UK coming out and being fined now. But the cynic in me says they're declaring their breaches, because the breaches that they're being fined for now haven't just happened. They happened a couple of years ago. But I think they're disclosing them now, and they're putting their hands up, and they're getting fined, because they'd rather be fined today than they would after May 25th when GDPR becomes law. So I think between now and the end of May, we'll see some more high-profile businesses put their hand up to say, do you know what? We had some big data breaches too.
That's true. I mean, those are the challenges, and a lot of breaches have happened over the years. But like you said, a lot of the organizations, they have chosen not to report them because they will face credibility risk, and reputation will be destroyed, and liability and a lot more complex challenges emerges from that. So they decided to just keep it, buried and not talk about it. But there are a lot of breaches that have happened, but I'm also not sure whether fines are going to do anything. I mean, all these, a lot of organizations, they have a lot of money. I mean, some fines are not going to do, they're not going to worry about it. They will, just take it as a cost of doing business. So fines probably are not going to change the organization's behavior. There is going to be very complex challenges, and they would just pay up the fine. That's not going to work probably. So we'll have to come up with a better way of making sure that organizations and decision makers, they all do their part in managing the cybersecurity risk effectively, and being transparent, where they can and where they cannot, to come up with proper effective solutions that can work within their organization's boundaries. Because for a lot of systemic risk, they are not going to be transparent, because if they are transparent when the whole systems are involved, that will create much bigger risk. So we have to see what are the risks and rewards of declaring those kind of the breaches that have happened, because it seems that as we are in 2018, that we are going to see many more such big risks that are emerging, where it could be just like cyber hijacking, where the hackers are able to take control of entire systems, like it's a transportation system or financial system. The hackers are probably working towards destroying the systems, and if that is the case, then it's going to be much more complex challenge, and the fines are not going to work, because we have to come up with way that how can we regain control of those systems, how can we effectively prevent those kind of takeover of the system. Because if hackers take over a transportation system of any city, or take over control of the other systems, financial system, or entire nationwide, how are we going to regain control of those? So those are, I think, the bigger challenges. What do you think about them, that hackers ability to take control over the entire systems?
Yeah, I mean, even things, I think infrastructure worries me. Yeah, when you look at road control or so on, you take a city and you take the computer system that controls its traffic light system. The havoc that you could cause just by forcing every single traffic light in a city to red. You know, uh, it, that's not a terribly clever attack, but it would wreak havoc. And no, I think you're right. I think there were all sorts of challenges. Let alone, when we get to autonomous vehicles and breaching breaching a vehicle, and where that then plays into other forms of terrorism and so on. I think it's a big challenge, and it needs to be on the agenda.
Yes, it definitely needs to be the top priority. I mean, as we are seeing right now, also the cryptocurrencies and the blockchain systems. I mean, the blockchain systems is being used right now for as a digital infrastructure, but there are a lot of threats emerging there also, which initially people are thinking blockchain is completely secure, but it's no longer the case. I mean, there are a lot of vulnerabilities, and all these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, and there are, as they are getting mainstream, we are seeing that all those cryptocurrencies, they are also vulnerable, and there are a lot of attacks happening. A lot of people's wallets are being taken over, and the exchanges also are facing threats. So there is a possibility of, it seems that there is a greater possibility of increase in cyber attacks on those kind of cryptocurrencies exchanges, as well as the blockchain based systems. What is your observation on that?
Yeah, well, I think, and I'm not a cryptocurrency expert, so but I think from my position, it's just awareness of the concern at the risk, and I think with every step forward and with every bit of technology, we have to weigh, what is the risk, and what are we doing about that? I mean, I think that one of the challenges, of course, is the people who are trailblazing aren't necessarily always the people who have that attention to detail in terms of have we thought of everything that could go wrong, and there needs to be robustness there.
Yes. Very true. There needs to be robustness. Now, one of your role is that you also are very heavily involved with the board of directors, and looking at how the organizations and boards are prepared for cybersecurity. What is your observation, that are they, all the board of directors, are they educated enough, are they capable enough to address the complex challenges of cybersecurity? Are they focused on resiliency? What is the level of preparedness when it comes to board of directors?
Yeah, no, and the straightforward answer is I don't think they are. I mean, I deliver training to boards of directors on cyber awareness, but so there are companies who do it, but they're the exception to the rule. And I think you know if you meet a business person and you ask them when was cybersecurity last on your board agenda, which I often do, then more often than not it's not. You know, they see that cyber is an IT problem,
Yes.
and cyber isn't an IT problem. IT is part of the technology, but do you know what? That cyber, the risk is a corporate problem. And the board of directors and every single person who sits on that board need to understand it. And they need to have a cyber response plan. And just like any other, you know, business continuity or disaster recovery plan, that plan needs to be tested, it needs to be understood, it needs to evolve. And there are just way, way too many businesses that have never looked at it.
Yes, very true, very true. And see, you hit on nail on another big problem. I mean, a lot of, I would say, most of the organizations think that cybersecurity is information security, and like you said, they think that that's a technical problem and technical challenge. That's not for them. But the fundamental challenge is that what is cybersecurity? That definition and understanding of whether what involves cybersecurity. Is it information security? Is it data security? Is it understanding what kind of different business models or technology models or governance models are emerging, or new way of things happening? And because of the new way of things happening all across nations in every sphere, how is their business or their products or their services or their initiatives are going to be impacted? What comes under the cybersecurity? So that is a bigger challenge, that from my assessment, decision makers are not thinking in the right way. They are focused on the information security part. They think that when they do that their part is done. But the bigger challenge is focusing on the strategic security risk, which should be a part of cybersecurity. Because if you look at the overall risk profile, 70-75% is about the strategic security risk, but everyone focuses on information security, operational security, legal risk, and all those things. So that is uh, probably we'll handle that on some other risk roundup, because that itself is a huge discussion, and it would take us a lot more time to just understand and discuss and debate about the changing nature of security, changing nature of risk, changing nature of what is cybersecurity, what is information security, to go through all those definitions and descriptions, and what should be and should not be considered cybersecurity. That itself is a big challenge. But let's talk about the book you have written about the cybersecurity and human firewall. Would you like to share that information about the book with our global viewers and listeners?
Yes, so the book's actually called "We're All Porn Stars," which is a bit of a controversial title, but it stems from a scam that was on social media, which is very amusing. And the way the scam works is it works on the premise that we all have a porn star name. And to work out what your porn star name is, you take the name of your first pet and then the first part of the name of the road that you lived on when you were growing up. And that's your porn star name. And it's very amusing. And when you see this on social media, you see thousands and thousands of people sharing the information. And this was how I opened my TED Talk. My TED Talk's called The Human Firewall, but I opened with this porn star game, and it's very amusing. And then I turn around and I say, the thing is, what you've just done, because I ask everybody at the TED Talk, I ask everyone to turn to their neighbor and introduce their porn star alter ego. And it's very amusing. And then I say, look, what you've just done is you've shared information that would be used for things like your password retrieval for your online banking. And suddenly, it dawns on people what they're doing. There's another one. So I wrote the book on the back of it called "We're All Porn Stars," and I'm currently writing a child-friendly one, because a number of people read the book and said, this is brilliant and I want to share it with my children, but I don't want to have a conversation about what's a porn star? And then at Christmas, the release of the new Star Wars movie, and I saw a scam aimed directly at children on social media, and it was, what's your Stormtrooper code? And to get your Stormtrooper code, you take your parents' credit card, and your Stormtrooper code is the 16-digit number off the front of the card and the 3-digit number off the back of the card. And it's totally blatant, and you'd think people won't fall for that. But I was discussing this with my wife, and my 7-year-old son walked in, and he said, "Daddy, can we do that?" Because they don't get it. He just wanted to know what his Stormtrooper code was. So the working title for my child-friendly book is We're All Stormtroopers. But the current cybersecurity book, which you can get on Amazon, is called We're All Porn Stars. And it's just about the conversations that we need to be having in the workplace and at home in our families to stay safe and stay protected.
Yes, that discussion, that dialogue needs to happen in each and every family. Just like, when we send our child to school, we tell them that look on the left, look on the right, and then cross the road. And those kind of guidelines needs to be there. That kind of discussion needs to be there, in each family about what it means when you log into your social media account, or when you go on the internet, what you need to do, what you have to be careful about. That discussion is very, very important. So now let's talk about your organization, RAMSAC. What role your organization plays in the entire cybersecurity ecosystem, and what would you like to tell our global viewers and listeners about your organization's efforts towards cybersecurity?
Okay, so my organization is RAMSAC, and our aim is to make IT simple. So our organization isn't just about cybersecurity, but what we do is we sit alongside our clients and say, okay, what isn't being addressed? We started life 25 years ago as a support business and a networking business, but what's grown up over the years is, look, what do you need us to be doing in your business, and where do you need us to put our arm around your shoulder and help you? And cybersecurity is one of those areas, and making sure that the board is being educated, and we're delivering staff cyber education, but you've got rigor and you've got process, and it's not just about the technology. Any IT company can put technology in place, but it's about the other things that we've talked about during this discussion in terms of, do you have those processes and the awareness and the proper protocols, and that's what we're doing to help our clients. Sure, we're doing all the technology as well, and we're certifying people with, cyber essentials and all those good industry standards that help protect. But I think that the harder piece is making sure that the CEO is sitting down and talking with the rest of the C-suite about, this is what the risk is, and what are we going to do about that risk.
Yes, very true, very true. No, those efforts are absolutely essential. So thank you so much, Rob, for participating in Risk Roundup today, and we appreciate your thoughtful insight on the current state of cybersecurity, and our global viewers and listeners would benefit tremendously from the understanding you provided on the cybersecurity trends and some predictions that you made for 2018. So even if a single individual or entity is able to come up with ideas to better the cybersecurity processes, tools, and technology for the complex challenges facing security community and manages associated security risk, based on the understanding they receive from this discussion we had today, this Risk Roundup dialogue has been of service, and we thank you for that. So looking back at the state of cybersecurity and the growing number of cybercrimes, there is a need for effective technology, non-technology solutions, and risk groups. Cybersecurity, geosecurity, and space security risk research centers are created for these very reasons, to identify, evaluate, and manage the risk facing NGIOACGs, that means nations, its government, industries, organizations, and academia, in cyberspace, geospace, and space. We at Risk Group believe that risk management, security, and peace, they all walk together hand in hand. Though security is related to management of threats and peace to the management of conflict, risk management is related to management of security vulnerabilities as well as management of conflict. And it's not possible to conceive any one of the three without the existence of the other two. All three concepts, they feed into each other. We believe that the security we build for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secure for everyone across nations. Tradition becomes our security. So, if we build a culture of managing risk effectively, it will lead us to security, and security will lead us to peace. Let's manage existing and emerging risks together. For more information on the Risk Roundups, to watch the Risk Roundup videos, or hear the Risk Roundup podcast, please go to riskgroupllc.com and do not forget to subscribe and share. Until next time, I'm Jayashree, host of Risk Roundup, signing off. See you next time. Thank you.